I'm Kevin Stillwagon, a retired chiropractor and also a retired Delta Airlines captain with more than 3 decades of airline flying experience. Several years ago, I began compiling data on the ages and causes of airline pilot deaths to see if there were any trends. And let me tell you, it is really hard to get airline pilot mortality data in terms of the ages and causes of death. The FAA doesn't even track pilot mortality data, but they could, and they should, because without ongoing tracking, dangerous trends stay invisible. And that's exactly what's happening. Airline human resource departments have pilot age of death data, but as an independent researcher, I can't get my hands on it. Life and health insurance underwriters for the airlines have the causes of death, but I can't get that either. My source of information came from the In Memoriam section of the Airline Pilot magazine. This is public information available to anyone, but it is not complete. The magazine will only publish the name of the pilot, the airline they flew for, the month and year they died, but the age and cause of death is never listed. The names will hit the magazine sporadically when either the family of the pilot or the airline notifies the Pilot Association of the death. Now, the list gives no hint if the pilot was active, disabled, or retired at the time of death. And sometimes the association doesn't get notified at all, so nothing will show up in print for a few pilots, and I have no idea how many. Additionally, not all airline pilots belong to the Airline Pilot Association Union. As an example, American, Southwest, and UPS all have their own independent unions. Some smaller airlines are not represented by any unions at all. So tens of thousands of pilots and potentially hundreds of deaths are not included in my database. What is included in my database are 3,447 pilot deaths that occurred in active and retired pilots represented by the Airline Pilots Association in the United States and Canada between January of 2019 and the present time, which is June of 2026. Each pilot death is tied to a published obituary that definitely has the age of death and sometimes will mention the cause of death. Look at this chart. This is the percentage of airline pilot deaths that occurred prior to the mandatory retirement age of 65. For 2019 and 2020, it's fairly stable, roughly 14%. But look at 2021, it jumps to nearly 20%, and it stays elevated year after year. It refuses to go back to the baseline. Now, some people will tell you that this is just noise. But look at the raw numbers. In 2019, 67 pilots under the age of 65 died, and by 2021, that number surged by almost 40% to 103. Even now, years later, we are seeing 70, 80, nearly 90 professional airline pilots dying prematurely every single year, and this is from the limited data I was able to gather from public records. These are not retirees. These are active working pilots, some of whom passed their medical exams just months before they died. What did they die of? Well, besides unknown causes described as unexpected, or there were some accidents, homicides, and suicides, we're talking about very short battles with pancreatic cancer, glioblastomas, and sudden cardiac events that are happening to people who are supposed to be one of the healthiest workforces in the country. When you see a 35% jump in premature mortality in a monitored, medically cleared population, you don't call this a coincidence, you call it a signal. And you start an investigation into the medical procedure that was authorized in December of 2020, considered safe by the FAA, was mandated by some airlines, including United, and it's still in use today. Now, some people will point to the early retirement packages that were taken by several thousand senior older pilots like myself and say, well, maybe the workforce just got younger and that changed the numbers. I've looked at that, but here's the problem. Airline pilots are a medically screened population. Whether you're 25 or approaching 65, you must pass that medical exam every 6 months just to keep your job. A demographic shift does not explain why suddenly in 2021 and 2022, we started seeing a surge in working age pilots dying from rapidly progressing cancers and sudden cardiac events. These are medical crises that started happening after the mandates. That's not a shift in demographics. That's a shift in health outcomes due to a procedure. If the airlines and the FAA feel that these numbers are not valid or have been debunked, then I have a very simple challenge for them. Release the full, de-identified, but unredacted year-by-year mortality data for all pilots from 2018 through 2026. If the data shows no spike, they should be eager to prove me wrong and put these concerns to rest. The silence from the FAA and the major carriers is deafening. They have full access to the data. They know the numbers. They're just hoping that if they don't look at the charts, the problem will go away. It won't go away. The pilots know, the families know, and now you know. Demand an investigation, because if the people on the flight deck aren't safe, nobody is. As always, thanks for watching and thanks for staying smart.